Difference makers, it is Tuesday, and I'm telling you, it's not just any ordinary Tuesday. It is Lynn Gardner Tuesday, and let me tell you, guys, if you don't know who I'm talking about here, I just want to say, first off, she's a friend, guys, and I mean that truly from my heart. She is a amazing, dear friend, and have grown to love her more and more over time. That every time that I speak with her, every time that we get with her, I just love her more and more and more, and I get to hear her heart. She is an amazing woman of God. She's a prayer warrior. I'm telling you, you always want to be on the right side of prayers, I can tell you that. She is a mother, a grandmother. She's a mentor to all. She's an author of multiple publications. I mean, when she comes on, we'll talk about that a little bit at the end probably. Bestseller on Amazon, or I forget. I forget all that stuff, but she's going to do it. She was an author at one time, and you're going to know that when she starts speaking today. But again, guys, like I said, best of all, she's just a dear friend of ours. And so with that, good morning, Miss Lynn Gardner. How are you this morning, honey?
Good morning, Wade. I couldn't be better. Thank you so much for that intro. You always just warm my heart. Just amazing. You guys are such wonderful friends of mine, and I give thanks to God every day for you. So good morning to you, Wade, and to DJ. What a wonderful reading. You did such a great job. That's one of my favorites of the scrolls. Good morning, Sam, out there, wherever you are, and good morning to all you difference makers. It is so good to be with you again this side of the call. And, it's also one of my favorite days of the month because I get to share with some of my very favorite people on the planet. So thank you so much for having me again. Things are going well here at the farm. Some of you follow me, some of you don't. It's been beautiful. We've had a couple of just beautiful snowfalls, and you can't imagine what it looks like here. You may not know that the inspiration for those front porch posts that some of you watch or read, it came from a beautiful morning when the snow had just blanketed the farm, and the American flag was, in contrast to all that white snow. That was the inspiration for the very first, post that you read. But it's beautiful. We're still very limited in terms of our gatherings here in Virginia. It's crazy. But I'm grateful to have two local kids and a couple of grandkids here, at least close by the farm. And they're all saving the day for me, believe it or not. Those little hugs that I get are keeping me going. I'm headed to Pittsburgh on Friday to stay a set of grands while their parents get a little alone time, some date night stuff, right? My son-in-law is set to deploy at the end of the month for 6 months. So please pray for Sam for safety and for my daughter as she's single parents for those 6 months. One thing that comes out of times like that, with my kids is that I get a look at what single parenting looks like, when one of them is not there and the other one's stuck with the kids, if you will. They wonder how I did it. And you know what? I have no idea how I did it, how I made it through as a single mom with 4. We just do what we got to do, right? But for sanity's sake, and for relationship's sake, the locals gather at the farm for a weekly dinner. My daughter calls it determined time together. I really like that because, if you don't, make sure that you have some determined time, sometimes you don't get enough time. And what a blessing it is. I wish you could be a fly on the wall. You can imagine we have a lot of humor going on in my family. We walk Lane every time we're together. I love that they can just recall times that bring them, so much joy or so much laughter. And most of the time it's good stuff. Sometimes it's not so good stuff when they talk about when they got in trouble and how that rolled. But my youngest son, Jared, some of you have met him. He's the one close by here at the, he was asking me the other day about scary times, times with the little kids and what was, one of the worst times, if you will. And I didn't have to think long and hard about it. Jared was one of these kids that he was fearless, and he was fearless around water. So I could to a pool, it would be Jared jumping in, and he would sink like a watermelon, so my father would say. And he just didn't have any fear. He'd be gulping water, and before you knew it, he went right back at it again. It scared you to death. So I take all 4 kids to the beach one year, and I think Jared, they were probably like 4, 6, 8, and 10. And, it was a crowded beach. And I had everybody holding on to each other, right? Mother duckling, trying to maneuver through a very crowded beach to find the right spot for the family. And as I was putting down the towels for everybody, Jared disappeared. And I tell you one thing, it was a crowded beach. He's little, he's 4 years old. He's fearless. And one thing that I can tell you is that was a desperate mother in those moments. And that message, the memories of that, inspired the message for you today entitled, How Desperate Are You? I can't begin to explain what my heart felt, but, we want to look at the definition of desperation, because sometimes people hear that word and they think they conjure up all kinds of things. But desperation, the definition is having a great need or urgent desire for something. Let me tell you something. This mama had an urgent desire to find her baby. Desperation isn't a word most people associate with business ever. And you know what? That's a mistake. Desperation that often kicks people into high gear. That desperation, sometimes it's important in your relationships. Desperation, with your children sometimes. Desperation in your walk of faith, or desperation in your business. Desperation is often the very thing that will propel you from where you are to where you want to be. In Proverbs 2:1 we read, As the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after you. I've read that and said that, spoken that a million times, and my heart swells up each time, because that's what desperation looks like, folks. As the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after you. If you've ever read one of those out there, you're hearing from a woman who is desperate for the living God. When it comes to succeeding in any area of life, it takes more than determination to get there. Determination is a really good thing. It's that thing that keeps us going, that reminds us not to quit, right? But it's the thing that compels us to learn, that, compels us to embrace systems and to be part of things like E90, to be on this call. It's that grit, if you will, that keeps us going. But it's the desperation that will take us to the top every single time when it's there. So if you consider many of our top leaders, of course you see determination, you see relentless, and yes, you hear, that if you will succeed if you just don't quit. We hear it over and over, right? But for most of them that we know, desperation was behind their momentum. Don't underestimate desperation when it's behind most of the success stories you read about in life. I'm going to share some of them where you've heard them before. I'm not speaking out of school. Romy, he was desperate to save his home from foreclosure. He'd already been there once. It disappointed his family, so to speak, and they were headed to another foreclosure. He was desperate to be able to save his family from that foreclosure. And look at where he is today. Cynthia lost her home, and she was desperate to rebuild. So when Romy contacted Cynthia, she was ready to go. Michelle's husband's business was teetering and tanking, if you will, and she was desperate to pull things together for her family. Bob Gradelli, he was working at an airport job, and desperate to find something new, right? And Tamia, of course, was desperate. She was desperate in the beginning for love, for those hugs, for those relationships, and then she transitioned in desperation to provide for her family. And you hear, her stories about, her kids being in the car, and she'd slide across the seat to get out of it and scrape her legs up, on this raid. She was desperate for a different life. And, the list goes on and on and on. We like to refer to it as rags to riches stories, but more than that, more than being rags, and a determination to make money, it's a desperation as the deer panteth for the water. In Psalm 63, about like he so often does, and he says, You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you. And then, because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live. That's what desperation looks like. It's a big difference, in being determined and being desperate. David isn't just determined to have a relationship with God. He's desperate to have that relationship with him. And that is why the king who talked about, all the sins, right? David the king, we talk about how, he enticed a married woman to the castle, and, he molested her, he seduced her, and he's got her pregnant, and then, he conjures up all these lies so he can get her husband home from the battlefield and try to get those two together so the baby could be blamed on the husband. And last resort, he had the husband go into the battle, and the husband was killed. He knew he would be killed, right? Well, how could you take a man like that and say, why would God refer to him, as a man after God's own heart? Why? Because David, despite all those sins, despite his shortcomings, was desperate to hear from God. As the deer panteth for the water, so longeth after you. In relationships, you can be determined all you want to. You can say, well, we made a commitment. We are determined. We're going to, stay together no matter what. And most of the time, or at least some of the time, you will. But you know what? When one gets desperate, when things get rocky and one gets desperate and they start thinking about, I don't want to live my life without you, right? When they get desperate to that point, you're going to see a whole lot of things change, because I see that desperation that takes us to a place where we're willing to do anything. We have a great need and an urgent desire, for the other person. That's what will make things not just, come through the tunnels of tribulation and relationships, but will come through them shining like a star. With our children, we can read every parenting book on the planet. We can set out to be the best parents, having all the details worked out in advance. The drill, I hear it from my kids. We're going to do this and we're going to do that, and they got it all worked out, right? Everything. But it's that, desperation sometimes that will set in a family, and it sets out apart from all the other situations. Just like with my son, I can remember like yesterday, that desperate mother, didn't look around and say, oh my gosh, I didn't just determine to find my child. It was that desperation around in a quick minute, climb up that lifeguard stand, tell that young man, we had to find my son. It's a desperation with your children. There were plenty of times I paced the floor at night praying for one of my children. Sometimes I prayed all night for one of my children, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be doing it again at some point. Like a deer panting for the water, I desperately appeal on their behalf. And you know what, guys? When you guys ask me to pray for something, there's an urgent need in your life, and you share it with me, I am desperately appealing to the King of all kings on your behalf. Sometimes people comment on how amazing it is that all four of my children are walking with the Lord. I mean, listen, if that doesn't happen, for a single mom walking the journey with four kids, and they all, walking with the Lord. So how and why did that come to be? Not because I'm great. There's nothing about me. The Bible says there's no good thing in me without him, right? But it's because they saw their mother as a deer panting for the, so my soul longeth after you. They saw me desperate for my God to intervene, to help me, to walk me through this journey of life, and I believed he would. And you know what? Now they do too. When it comes to your faith, listen, there's plenty of people out there determined to be good Christians. You see it. That determination, when it lacks desperation, is going through the motions. They go to church, they might volunteer somewhere. They have their 22 minutes of quiet time in the morning. They read a little bit of their Bible based on a schedule. But until or unless they become desperate for the living God, they can't have the relationship with him that he longs to have with them. Goings in life just doesn't cut it. And, it's very sad to see, so many people lack that in the relationship with God. That's why, for instance, you'll see, so many of us that have been to that journey. Let me tell you something. He took me to a place of my life where I was desperate, and it has never left me, right? So sometimes big valleys, there's big problems, there's big things in life to get us to that place where we call out just like David did, desperate, panting, just like a deer looking for water. And lastly, guys, when it comes to business, plenty of people say they're determined to succeed. But you know what? Far too few ever do. You look out it's just the reality. They have everything it takes to succeed. They're putting in the effort to succeed. Some of them put in more effort than I could ever even imagine. But the desperation component is missing, that urgent need. And this is why you'll hear Tamia say, why doesn't make you cry? It's not big enough. It needs to be something big, not just a car or like a blue one. It's bigger than that. It's that urgent need of desperation. It's that, not just the passion that will propel you. It's desperation. So I have to ask you again, how desperate are you? Do you have that within you? There's a bit of a risk, if you will, for entrepreneurs that comfortable, or maybe they're already comfortable financially outside of their business. Maybe their spouse has a great paycheck, or maybe they live live off Social Security. I don't know, but they're comfortable. So since the key ingredient to success is desperation, is you're comfortable and you're content, you know what? You don't have any reason to take a whole bunch of chances and put yourself out there. And, you don't have any reason to pursue those things because you're already comfortable. That's what's happened, frankly, in the church over the last, couple of decades. The church is comfortable, so it's complacent. The bills are paid and the people are coming and everything's great. So it's complacent. It's not desperate for anything, but I have to change that. One thing you can glean from psychology, I've read a lot about it, because it's being involved in training and stuff like that. One thing you can glean from psychology is that people have to be desperately uncomfortable before they're willing to change. That's true with everything, from relationships or if they're dealing with addiction, whatever it is. People have to be desperately uncomfortable before they're willing to make the changes that make the difference. That's why, the successful in terms of success is not just money, right? But relationships and pursuing their interests and having a well-balanced life, if you will. That they're the majority. Most successful people, have that desperation, and the ones that don't just don't get it. Success is happiness and contentedness, doing what we love, of course, and of course being financially successful. So the missing component to getting there for many of you, many of your friends, many of your team, is that lack of desperation. Some of you, the bills will be paid no matter what you do, whether you're doing the business or you're not. And so a lot of times you can look at it that you're doing something that brings you joy, and there is nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking for success, the big success, if you say to yourself, I want to be Tamia, I want to be Romy, I want to be whatever, if you're looking for that, you better start desperation. So how desperate are you? It could be that you want to retire your mate, that you have that need, that desire, that thing so that you guys can travel the world together before this life is over for you. It could be that you want to be somebody. Maybe you grew up, being told you never would be. You want to be somebody. Maybe that's the source of desperation within you. It could be that you want to be the one and only successful person in your entire family for generations, and that's what will be your source of desperation. It could be that you want to fund college for all your grandkids so they don't get, saddled with debt trying to get an education. It could be anything, but it better be big. So how desperate are you? As the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after thee. That deer isn't just wandering around, looking here and there, hoping to find a little water. That deer is panting. It's desperate to find it. Determination will help you keep going about that. You'll go through the motions, but desperation is what's going to drive you to the top. And everybody within them, there's, if you ponder that and you get below the surface, get into the underbelly of what it's going to take you to succeed, you're going to find that you need desperation in there. I'm reminding you of the journey of the top, to the top. Well, over and over we see these stories, lists of people, what drove them to the top. We often say, wow, they had grit, or wow, they were determined. They wouldn't quit. We tell the Michael Jordan stories and the Edison stories, right? They just went on and on. And I guarantee you, if you had a heart-to-heart with any of those people, you would find that they were destined to make a different life. There are some out there, quote-unquote famous people that have made it to the top, well beyond what most of us can ever even imagine. Brad Pitt, for instance, whether you like him or not, he was out there wearing a chicken suit for a fast food chain until his desperation kicked him into doing whatever it took. Sean Connery was, a milkman. Can you even imagine that? And he didn't want to be a milkman his whole life. He was desperate to have a life because he wanted to be that, successful one in his family that none of his family had seen before. Many of you might like Tim Allen. You saw him on The Tool Man, right? Tim Allen spent 2 years in prison for pain. And he, when he was in prison, he was so scared that his humor was kicked into high gear. And it was that desperation to make it through prison that propelled him to the top in his industry. Hugh Jackman was a clown. Can you even imagine that? Operating as a clown before he came who he is today. Ava Mendes, Dogs in the Mall, and she was determined that was not going to be her destination, and she was desperate for a big life. Madonna worked at Dunkin' Donuts, and, can you even imagine Madonna at Dunkin' Donuts? And she may have gone through those motions, and that may have paid her rent, but she was desperate to be a superstar. Steve Jobs, he was was a friend's floor when he dropped out of college. Can you imagine that? Didn't even have a bed. But he was desperate, and he was desperate to make something huge happen in life, and the rest is history. Now, Stephen King grew up, really strapped for money and poverty, really, raised by a single mom. And he vowed, he was desperate to get out of that, not himself, but for his mom, so that he could bless her too. There's going to be desperation behind anything big or any big story you ever read. So as you sit there looking at what steps can I take, what practical things can I do, how can I implement this and how can I do that, what's really missing is what we call a why. It's that desperation trip. So in this, you have to be uncomfortable enough to seek change in your circumstances. And so for some of you, I'm happy for you if you don't have any ripples in your life, but you better find some place where there's a source of desperation that will propel you, just like it propelled me to the top of a lifeguard stand. It will propel you whatever it takes. See, it's that whatever it takes. It's a component that lacks in so many people. Will you get uncomfortable? Will you pick up the phone? Will you do the things that bring the fear out in your belly? Will you do them no matter what? Because you're desperate for a change. It isn't really up to riches at all. That's sometimes the end result, especially now when we're talking about business. This is desperation in action. People so desperate enough for a different life that they're willing to do whatever they need to do to get it. So how desperate are you? We really have to look at that. It's a forever for all of us, frankly, not to become complacent. Everybody struggles with that. You just kind of get to that place sometimes where you're going through the motions in your relationships, with your children, in your faith, and in your business. It's a forever struggle not to become complacent. When you've got that thing burning within you, inspiration for life to be different, all it takes is a simple reminder of that to kick complacency to the curb and get back down to business. And, we can do all kinds of things that make us feel like we're working in business, can't we? Oh, boy, we can do all kinds of things that make us look busy, being on calls and going through the kinds of things we can do. But all kinds of things aren't necessarily income-producing ones. So if you find yourself there where you feel like I'm doing everything and I just can't figure out, why it's not moving forward, I have my why and I have my vision board and I go to all this and I'm on all these calls and all that, but you're not producing income that you say you want to produce, you better start getting desperate. If you aren't where you want to be, it might take that desperation to get you moving forward. It's as that deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after ye. Can you imagine yourself in that place with your business where you're panting for it? You're desperate for it again, as I was, to find my child that, by the way, we found a mile down the beach. When a lifeguard found him, the undertow had just dragged that little boy a mile down the beach. So, do you have that kind of desperation in your life? Do you know how to turn that kind of thing up? Again, I hurt almost every day to the world, and I see so many people. You actually could probably define their actions and their words online as being desperate. They're desperate to see things be different in America. They're desperate for all these things, and they're not afraid to tell everybody, how the West was won. They're desperate, for, counts to be reconciled and desperate for impeachment, whatever it is. You know what, guys? On the big radar screen of life, none of that matters at all. It's when they get desperate and they call out to the living God the way David did, as a deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after you. You know what? All that stuff they think they're desperate about, desperate to be heard about, that all dims in comparison. So remember, David also said, I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you. And then, because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. So there are a lot of people that we see out there are disrupted and a desperation thing going and headed in the right direction. They wouldn't be bedazzled by all this stuff out there. Nothing really matters except is our heart longing for the living God, and do our actions look like it? I also, it pains me sometimes as I look out at parents, and again, so methodically working through ships, they're going through the motions, and boy, they're great. The kids look good, and they have good manners, and all that stuff on the outside looks good, but those poor things never see that desperation to long for more with the living God, more with their relationships, more, for someday for them, and with that desperation will kick them into a place where they say, I will do anything I need to do because I am desperate for that change in my life. So how desperate are you? What does it take to get you there? You might have to reconsider that why and reconsider some things in your life. And you know what? It doesn't always come down to money. So it comes down to freedom. Desperate to be able to spend time with the one you love, or desperate to be able to be a part of your grandchildren's life. Desperate for that time when you can sit on the beach and write a book. Whatever it is, it's got to burn in your belly. So as you consider a why is a whole lot more than just why. A why is that how much are you for it? How much are you going to be uncomfortable for it? And that will keep your determination going, and eventually you will get there. But you won't just get there going through the motions. This is my why. Here's my pretty vision board, and I'm doing all these steps. You better get desperate. So the $64 question for you again today is, how are you? And that's it for me, Wade.
So there we go. Got my board all messed up. Man, amazing. Guys, how desperate are you? I love this, Lynn. This is so good. Just reaching into the hearts of men, men and women, but just reaching into the hearts and just saying, look, where are you? Where are you? Man, I love this. This was absolutely great. Thank you so much,
it's
honey.
Definitely oh, my goodness, it's always my pleasure. But, yeah, you see that kind of desperation, probably everybody on the call, everybody listening. There was some point in their life, whether maybe it was a sickness, right, or maybe a brokenness or whatever. You've been desperate at some point, and you know what that looks like. Maybe it didn't feel good because it was wrapped in emotions, right? But, and then at those times, people cling at, as a deer panteth for, and they'll go out and look for God to intervene, right? And then we go back to sleep. But we can't do that in our life with our family, and definitely, and as it pertains to this call, certainly not for your business. You need that desperation.
That's absolutely right. I mean, that's, I was just amazed at all the top stories there, and as one myself, in desperation is what led us to the business side of this, and right. Desperation led us to the health side,
right.
And through that desperation, it's now leading us to the wealth side. That's not bragging. That's just the reality. Being out there, doing what's right, doing it day after day after day, not quitting and keeping going. Man, this is so wonderful. This is so wonderful.
Yeah, that's so true. With your journey, it's the same thing. Desperate to find something to turn life around again. And it was that desperation that, you get out there and went against the flow. I mean, you went in the very beginning, you find a little space, go out and get people into your store with the free water thing. And you were desperate to make it work. And it was that desperation, not just the mindset of, what can I do and where can I go and thinking it through. No. When you're desperate, you find something, you cling to it like a snapping turtle and you don't let go. You bring up a good point because, gosh, Wade, sometimes I get people, I call it lashing out at me, but they'll be critical because I talk about money. When I tell you something, money is a very important part of life. God doesn't expect his people to be looking to be taken care of. Even Paul said, when we were among you, we worked so that we would not be a burden. God wants us to be working and responsible people. And, he's the one to produce wealth. He gives us the ability. So wealth is not a bad thing. God sees the right heart, the heart like you just described yours and Gina's, right? He will bless that. Because he knows that you're not just going to be, jetting the world, but you're going to be putting it to use in the kingdom. So if anybody out there gets offended, I'm sorry. I don't mean to ever offend you, but money is a big part of kingdom building, and so I'd never apologize for that part.
That's right. In the world, it takes money to build, and so in the kingdom, yes. Which is in the world, not of the world, but right. In the world,
right.
We have to utilize those things of the world. And so you're so right. I mean, that's, kingdom building takes success on our
yes.
part in order to help build success in what we do. So that is so good. Man, what an awesome guys. This is just, I mean, Lynn, you've just done such a wonderful job. But listen, there's so much more to Lynn and so much stuff that's going on. This is just one of the great lessons. Lynn is an author. I said that at the very start, and here's where I start embarrassing her and all this stuff. How do we get more about how to dig into the core of you are? I mean, there are some great titles that you have written, great books that you have written, and so, Lynn, how do we get into that?
Well, before I tell you that, Wade, I just have to tell you, you have no idea what it does to my heart when you say, "Son of God." You know, that's what I want to be known for in my family, in my life, my business. And when you say she's a friend, because that is my heart's desire, to be the friend to everybody. And thank you for that. I just hit me again. I just want to say thank you again, because that blesses me beyond any words. So speaking of words, yep, there are books out there. Man, I tell you, I told you last time I was on that, hey, the next book is going to be out, in that couple days or week. And it, it went through edit. And you know what happened next? Lynn got a hold of it again. And I just couldn't let go. I just kept changing, and the Lord kept bringing things to my heart. And no, it's not a big, thick novel, but it was important to me, truthfully, ready to pull the trigger and put it up on Amazon. And it is entitled, For the Love of God, Break the Chains. And it really is talking about the chains of debt. We're in the bondage, right? And so it's really talking about that from a biblical perspective and how we got here. It didn't just happen, and enticed to be in debt. So I'm just praying over that one. And it truly will be up on Amazon here in the next 24 to 48 hours. So you can find all the things I've written. There will be one right behind this one. This is just took priority over the other one. But we have Walking on Water. That was the first one, God inspired. And boy, it was just and it got to be such a burden that I was desperate to get that thing out there, because I knew God wanted it. That's a testimony of a piece of my life. And it's been such a blessing to hear people, talk about how it's blessed their family. And I think I may have shared with you, but around Christmas time, this lady reached out and said I bought 7 copies of Walking on Water, because after I read it, I saw a big piece, our family, in your book. I could see it, but we haven't recovered the way you have. And so she bought 7 copies for her siblings. What a beautiful thing, just to be a part of that. I'm just so honored God uses me that way. Next book was really for yours and mine, and it's called Toilets, Taps, and Trash, and it's a look at, again, how do we get here? What happened to our water, and what are we being exposed to today? And I've got great things out there. It certainly helped my business, and great things for you guys. And just so you know, I mean, as you're out there trying to, for lack of a better minimize, what you have, it's not a bad thing to be able to say, hey, read this book. It's, number 1 on Amazon. That kind of puts a feather in your cap, not so much mine, right? So it's been a great thing to help. The next one was 12 Steps to Climbing Out of the Dark Place, and definitely that one is the one getting the most traction, because, guys, boy, I tell you, I just pray that some of you get that desperation to be walking a life like Christ, with that compassion to not judge, and to be there, and to be have a sensitive spirit to the ones suffering, because people are suffering because of the COVID, because of the ISHM, because the world won't shut up about how bad things are. There are people, young people, people of all ages, calling it a day, taking their life by their own hand. So anyway, 12 Steps to Climbing Out of the Dark Place is just a practical look, and not ever saying, that you don't need medications. I would never say that. But practical things, when you feel that coming on, and I have been there and done that, once you feel it, that you're struggling, or you just need to get out of the doldrums or whatever, it's a great look at how you can do that. And it's a very simple thing, from get up and get a shower to do something for a total stranger, and never, anonymously. Great. Pick me up there. A practical guide, if you will. It's hard to think practically when you're in depression, but it really is helping people, and I'm so grateful for that. So I'm excited. That stuff is good. We do have the event penciled in, as we say, right? I don't know. It really depends on what's going on in the world. I'm still treating COVID as the plague. I have no earthly idea. I'm praying that we'll be able to go forward, and I know if we do, it's going to be amazing.